Alaska and Russia are closer than you might think, separated by just 53 miles of open water called the Bering Strait. But it wasn't always that way. Today, the Bering Strait connects the Pacific Ocean and the Arctic Oceans, dotted with islands like St. Lawrence. But during the last glacial maximum, about 19,000 to 29,000 years ago, sea levels were nearly 300 feet lower. Those islands? Just the tops of mountains that would have dominated the landscape. And with sea levels that much lower, that 53-mile-wide waterway was actually a 1,000-mile-wide land bridge connecting North America and Asia. That region is underwater now, but sediment cores suggest it was a refuge during the Ice Age, populated with shrubs and trees that sustained animals, and possibly people. Woolly mammoths, mastodons, Arctic camels, horses, and many other mammals migrated between the continents. Early humans likely did too, nearly 20,000 years ago, possibly becoming the first people to reach North America when they settled in coastal Alaska. Native Alaskans have survived Russian colonialism in the 1700s, U.S. Army Corps of Engineer workers reshaping Alaska in 1942, and waves of missionaries who forced indigenous children into abusive boarding schools that attempted to strip them of their ancestral language and culture. They're incredibly resilient, but their challenges are far from over, because today the people of Alaska face a new and daunting obstacle: catastrophic climate change. In part one of this series, we looked at the science behind Alaska's changing climate, the data, the warming trends, the disappearing sea ice, and the shifting storm tracks. We talked about the remnants of Typhoon Halong, but statistics don't tell you what it feels like when the tide starts rising outside your window at midnight. This is part two. And this is the story of what happens when a storm meets a village that's been standing for generations. I'm meteorologist Emily Gracey. Today we're going off the radar and headed to Kwigillingok, a small coastal community in western Alaska, to hear from Dustin Evon. He grew up there. He survived Halong there. And today he serves as Kwig's Tribal Resilience Coordinator, the person responsible for tracking storms, assessing infrastructure, applying for federal grants, and helping his community plan for a future that may no longer include the ground it's standing on. We spoke with Dustin remotely from western Alaska, and you'll hear that remoteness in his audio at times. Alaska is massive, with hundreds of indigenous communities along coasts and rivers. Their presence here goes back to the Ice Age, the rhythms of life, where to harvest in the summer, where to shelter in the winter, were shaped by patterns of cold, wind, and sea.
Alaska's a pretty big state. It's almost half the size of lower 48. They're scattered apart and they range, each community ranges anywhere from under 100 to as much as a little over 1,000, depending. From what I've learned, they go back to Ice Age when people from Asia and Siberia walked across the sea ice and settled what's known as Alaska now. And my ancestors, they didn't really have a settlement. They used to have pretty much seasonally, they go here for gathering, here for the winter, here for the summer. So yeah, there's a lot of communities along the coast. Majority of them are along the coast of Alaska.
These communities know storms and they know cold, but the environment is changing. Permafrost is disappearing, rivers are eroding banks, and storms are getting more dangerous.
Major thing I've witnessed is land subsidence caused by permafrost. When I was growing up, a couple inches down, you'll see permafrost. As years went on, land started sinking, and we noticed permafrost is slowly disappearing. Even on the river, when we go by boat here, you used to be able to see ice on the side of the river, but now, ever since it's melted, eroding, they're near triple in width now compared to when I was growing up.
Dustin started watching Halong a week out. People in Quig track storms on apps and by NOAA updates. At first, many thought this would be like other storms. Then Dustin saw something that worried him.
Well, about a week before I started issuing storm that they're tracking, but the majority of us thought it was just going to be another storm. And then the day before, I noticed on Windy, it had a really strong portion just below the eye, and it was too close for comfort for me.
The tribal council ordered shelter at the school, but not everyone went. Dustin describes the late night when the water came in.
Around midnight or just past midnight. And that was when the tide was starting to come in. So I kept looking out. Not long after wind started picking up, I was watching for a few minutes and I saw how fast it was coming up. So I got myself ready and went to my uncle's house, which is further away from the river and usually away from the flood zone. And then as the night progressed, my tribal administrator said he's going to go check around. So I got ready and followed him, and then we didn't go that far. We got to this area where it was all water, and he says, we're going back.
They left for the school, and conditions got worse.
We went to the school, and we barely made it. My tribal administrator and his family, they were almost behind us, and they couldn't cross that anymore because it got too deep, and the currents were so strong. Those who stayed home started calling and posting on social media that they're drifting away.
In case you missed that, Dustin said that they were watching the people that stayed in their homes posting on social media that they were drifting away. Homes with people inside them were floating away in the rising water. When daylight broke, the scale of damage was clear. Rescue teams moved in and evacuations began. But evacuating a village in western Alaska is not like evacuating a coastal town in Florida. There are no highways connecting Kwigillingok to the rest of the state. No roads out. In fact, most of rural Alaska villages aren't connected by road to anything at all. If you need to leave, you fly, or you go by boat. In the winter, sometimes by snow machine. Which means when a storm hits overnight, there's no way to simply drive away.
And the whole town went to the school pretty much later that day, and then the Alaska State Troopers came, I think next day or 2 days later. But before they came, evacuations began. Troopers said, it's unsafe here. It's best everybody goes. Right after that, there's like 20 planes came, caravans, push planes, Chinook helicopter, Black Hawks. 20 to 30 people remained though. Started fly people to Anchorage with their C-17.
On the news, it looked dramatic, a whole village boarding a military cargo plane. For the families on that flight, it wasn't a spectacle, it was displacement. Dustin returned in November. The village looked different. Debris was everywhere. Homes that had been in one place were gone or scattered.
They couldn't do much as we were on the cusp of winter. Debris removal was minimal. About 90% of the boardwalks were damaged or drifted away. There's been 2 contractors lifting and fixing homes. I was able to briefly go back in November. It just doesn't feel like a village because all these houses are in different areas.
This is the place Dustin grew up. Relocation has been discussed since he was a child. When he started his role as Tribal Resilience Coordinator, relocation became his top priority. They were on the verge of getting a FEMA grant to do a feasibility study on the selected community site. Then DOJ happened, and the program got canceled. This situation isn't unique, it's the norm. In early 2024, the Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium studied more than 100 tribal communities facing erosion, flooding, and thawing permafrost. What they found was a system that was never designed for what these villages actually need. Federal disaster programs are competitive. They're short-term, spread across dozens of different agencies. A community like Quig might win a grant to study a relocation site and then have to start over and compete again just to get that money to design it. And then again for construction. Each round can take years. Each round, they might lose. There's no single federal program built to move a village, not one. And the report estimated the total unmet needs runs in the billions.
But after Halong, we realized that initial selected site we were going to do studies on is not going to be feasible after this storm. So now we're looking at the different sites further inland and way higher grounds. But for now, the short-term plan is rebuilding and fixing houses that are fixable. And hopefully, our ultimate goal is to relocate.
Moving is not only logistically hard, it's personal.
If I went back in November, there was this one afternoon I decided to go to where my house was, and right next door was my grandma's house. It used to be, and everything was gone. It finally sank in and we lost everything.
He wants to stay. He understands they may have to leave. But in a system built on competitive grants and uncertainty, survival itself comes with a price tag.
These grants, they're all competitive. It's just not enough for every community. Plus, their opportunities are limited. All you can do is do it through phases and hope you get re-awarded for the next phase. That would take years.
Scientists have begun to listen more closely to local knowledge. For decades, indigenous peoples passed on warnings about changing climate, rising water, shifting land.
Local knowledge was majority of the time ignored until like the last decade they finally started realizing that local knowledge has always been correct. What we've been witnessing over the last decade, which is permafrost thaw, sinking lands, combined with the rising sea levels, has been increasing floods, and they were getting more threatening every year.
What would help? Predictable, guaranteed funding. Enough money to plan in phases. Time windows to work outside of winter.
Pretty much wish list is a guaranteed amount per year, especially with our seasons. We pretty much can't do any projects throughout the winter.
He's trying to plan in phases, year by year, in a place where both the funding and the climate refuse to cooperate.
Yeah, climate is definitely changing. We've been having unusual warm winters. Our elders used to tell us what their elders used to tell them, that the climate will change. And sure enough, the last couple of years, we've been seeing that in the southern states. Yeah, we never thought it would happen in our lifetime. Here we are witnessing it.
Dustin's ancestors crossed a land bridge to get here. They survived colonization. They survived forced assimilation. They survived storms. Now his generation faces a different kind of uncertainty. Not whether they're strong enough, but whether the ground beneath them will remain. And whether a nation that helped them create this crisis will help them adapt to it. Off the Radar is a production of the National Weather Desk. Make sure you're following the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. New episodes publish every Tuesday. This is part 2 in our Alaskan climate series. If you haven't already, go listen to part 1, where we speak to a scientist about the changing climate in Alaska. Thank you so much to Dustin Evon for sharing his story today. Our hearts go out to those villages like Kwig and Kwigillingok, those living on the front lines of this climate crisis and facing migration in order to survive. Thank you to the National Weather Desk and Sinclair Broadcast Group for their ongoing support of the podcast. And as always, thank you to Brian Petrus for his help writing today's episode. I'm meteorologist Emily Gracey. Make it a great day.